All right, guys, welcome to Lecture 6, and this reading covers McKay, pages 400 to 410, and today we're going to look at the growth of the Reformation. Last lecture, we talked about Martin Luther and his initial actions, and we're going to discuss that more in class tomorrow, but for today, we're going to talk about how the Reformation grows. The first thing we need to look at is just an overview of Germany and the role that Germany plays in the Protestant Reformation. I want you guys to keep in mind that unlike Spain, England, and France, Germany was a little bit different. And if you recall, that was known at the time as the Holy Roman Empire. And the biggest difference, of course, was that it lacked a very strong central government, whereas Spain, England, and France have begun to develop those governments and that very sort of nationalistic way of ruling. So remember that the Holy Roman Empire, or Germany, was basically ruled by an emperor, but the emperor was not hereditary. The emperor was elected by the electors. That's the 7 most powerful princes. And in 1519, those electors make a very fateful choice when they choose Charles V as emperor. He's 19 years old at the time, and he is the first of many powerful Habsburg rulers that we're going to see. So Luther, who had religious motives for his breakaway from the Catholic Church, is going to meet some very political responses, and those are going to be delivered at the hands of Charles V, our young Habsburg ruler. So that's where we'll start today. So just a little background on the Habsburg dynasty. I know in the notes here, if you're looking at it, says Habsburg with a B at the top and then Habsburg with a P at the bottom. You'll see it both ways, and I apologize if there's any confusion for that, but in 1477, the Habsburgs had become an international power, and the way that happened was they had formed an alliance through marriage with the Burgundians, who, if you guys remember, were in western France, and that was through the marriage of the Habsburg Emperor Maximilian to Princess Mary of Burgundy. Of course, this angered the French. The French had a lot of hostility towards the Burgundians from the history of the 100 Years' War. And this is going to begin a period of sporadic wars between France and the Habsburgs that are going to be fought over territory. Most of those will be fought in Germany as we go forward, so keep an eye on that. Things aren't going to get any better between the French and the Germans as we progress, and really the hostilities remained all the way into the 20th century, as you guys know. So the marriage of Maximilian the Habsburg and Mary of Burgundy sparks a very long struggle, as I mentioned, between France and Germany. It's mostly going to be fought on German soil. The heir of Maximilian and Mary's name is Philip, and Philip will marry the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella. And you guys will remember that Ferdinand and Isabella is the couple, the power couple, so to speak, that more or less united Spain. I mean, not completely. If you remember the test question, it was a little bit tricky, but they did create a dynastic rule there. The son of Maximilian and Mary will be Charles V, and that's where we pick up today. Charles, when he's elected Holy Roman Emperor in 1519, is going to be the ruler of a very diverse kingdom. Charles himself is a very devout Catholic, and he is going to see himself as the Christian emperor of the world, more or less with the Pope's backing, although it sort of ebbs and flows. This is interesting about Charles. He's a German emperor and the king of Spain, but he's born in Belgium. So that's Charles V, and that is the weirdness that is the Habsburgs. So in terms of Luther and the political impact and his run-ins with Charles V and the Habsburg dynasty, he saw religion as a public matter. He believed that, and this is something for you guys to understand, Luther didn't love the Catholic Church in any way, but at the same time, he was not a fan of religious freedom. He felt that religion should be a matter of state, so it was a public matter. And the idea was essentially, from Luther's perspective, that the ruler of a territory should choose the faith of his subjects. Now, from Luther's perspective, that should always be Protestantism, but of course that wasn't the case. Luther was not a rebel, and he did not encourage rebellion, and that's something that you guys need to remember for the test. Luther did translate the Bible into German, which really stirred up a lot of nationalism in Germany. And Luther also appealed to German patriotism in a way that had really kind of been unseen before. And I think as much as anything, he also appealed to a sense of greed among the German princes. After all, the Catholic Church was probably, after the more powerful nobles, the largest landholder in Germany. And so the opportunity to seize those church lands was very appealing to princes of the territories in the Holy Roman Empire. So he urges the confiscation of church wealth and lands. He abolishes indulgences and celibacy and creates the Protestant church as we know it, or Lutheran church. where priests could marry. They got rid of the sacraments, and it was really a pretty marked move away from the Catholic doctrine, which had been dominant up to this point. So some German princes embraced Lutheranism for actually its true purpose, for the religious and spiritual reasons that we've talked about. Some of them are really swayed by Luther's argument that the true source of authority was the Bible. Others, of course, are swayed by wealth and the opportunity to seize land from the very powerful Catholic Church. At the Diet of Worms, it looks like worms, but it's Worms. Luther is condemned by Charles V, but Luther is sort of ferried away from that meeting by a rebellious elector. So Luther goes into hiding, even though he's condemned. Charles V can't get his hands on him. So essentially that condemnation by Charles V, the Habsburg Emperor of Luther, is ignored. Charles continues to defend Catholicism, and that really hinders unity in Germany, maybe as much as anything. Charles himself, he's got other wars going on. The Turks are threatening Austria, and they have Vienna under siege. So there are a lot of sort of factors that are keeping Charles from pursuing a Catholic unified Germany that he can't really deal with at the time in an effective way. From 1521 to 1555, we see a series of wars between Charles V and the French kings. Those are known as the Habsburg-Valois Wars. Those are going to be settled by the Peace of Augsburg that we're going to get into tomorrow. Now, in terms of converts to Protestantism, there are several that are notable. The first is maybe the Anabaptist. They don't live very long in terms of being a powerful religious sect, but their essential theory was that children should not be baptized. And the thought was, children could not willfully accept membership into the Christian church. So the Anabaptists believed that people should only be baptized as adults, and they thought that was more of a return to the early sort of church standards where most of the converts had been adults. They preached religious toleration, allowed women to be ministers, and also were pacifists, which didn't do them any favors in terms of standing up for themselves. Most importantly, perhaps, they were in favor of separation of church and state. Very progressive and forward-thinking, especially for the 16th century. And as a result of that, they were bitterly persecuted. Most of them were burned at the stake or drowned, which is not a fun way to go out. But their legacy will be the Quaker movement, the Baptist, and the Congregationalist, and the U.S. Constitution, which is one of its basic tenets is that separation of church and state. So we do see a very strong legacy of the Anabaptist even today in modern America. So in England, initially Henry VIII had been a very staunch Catholic. He was even given the title of Defender of the Faith by the Pope, which the Queen of England still carries today. We had seen earlier reform movements in England, starting with the Lollards. The Lollards had been the followers of John Wycliffe. They had stressed the importance of individual reading of the Bible. They were against the sacraments. They were opposed to church wealth and worldliness, et cetera, et cetera. They had been driven underground. By the early 16th century, the English church had been seen as really a healthy, sort of energetic Catholicism that had been well embraced by the population, and it was very popular. The church in England was powerful despite its troubles. And along comes Henry VIII, who you see here. Henry and his Reformation in England really it starts as an act of state, but it's sparked by the king's own love life and his emotional life, which is it's pretty profound how much effect one man can have on the history of a whole country, and Henry VIII really personifies and epitomizes that idea. So Henry VIII had first married Catherine of Aragon. Catherine was Habsburg by family. She had initially been married to Henry's brother Arthur, who had died. So when Arthur dies, Henry marries his brother's wife. Henry, in the meantime, is a very lusty fellow, and he always keeps his eyes on the ladies of the court. One particularly beautiful woman who catches his eye is a woman named Anne Boleyn. Now, Henry and his original wife, Catherine, had a daughter, Mary Tudor, who becomes known as Mary or Bloody Mary. They had a daughter, but Henry had failed to have a son with Catherine, so he falls in love with Anne Boleyn, and he hopes that she will be able to deliver him the son that Catherine had not been able to deliver. he petitions the Pope for an annulment, but the Pope